At the temple in Jesus' day, when people gave their tithe, they had to announce the amount that they were putting into the plate. Anybody want to try that? I lift my eyes to the hills. From where is my help to come? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved, and he who watches over you will not fall asleep. Behold, he who keeps watch over Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord himself watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand, so that the sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve you from all evil. Is he who shall keep you safe. The Lord shall watch your going out and your coming in from this time forth forevermore. The profound and prophetic and hope-filled, faithful words of that psalm, Psalm 121, for those who may be familiar, were upon my heart as I, in the past few days, was providing as best comfort as I could to people who were reeling in the aftermath of our elections. For those individuals who felt vulnerable and helpless, powerless, for those who felt the weight of the past coming back, trauma experience, perhaps memory of riots in our streets, times of uncertainty, and the like. I was doing my best to provide comfort to our members of our LGBTQ community who wondered if they were next, if they who had joined together in the covenant of marriage would have their marriages somehow written off. To try my best to provide comfort for African American, brown, and black people who were wondering, what are we doing? Where are we going as a country? Are we going backwards or forwards in terms of racial progress? Are we ever going to confront our racist history and past? I tried my best to comfort women who were wondering, are other rights of mine going to be taken away? Those words of that psalm helped me stand up when I was struggling under the weight. Because for me, you see, the elections were not just about left versus right. There was something spiritual at work, something moral at work. And it had been my hope that we would come together as a people and move forward with a sense of unity and togetherness. And yet, here we stand on two constantly diverging pathways. There are those on one path who truly are in a time of elation, believing in their heart of hearts that their lives will be better off and prosperous. There are those, again, who are reeling because for them, this was more than just about left versus right. It was about an existential reality of marginalization and vulnerability. And yet, in the midst of that, there we, the church, there Jesus is, trying to pull us together that we may be one as he prayed that we would be, that we would awaken to our shared belovedness, that we would not lose sight of the Imago Dei, the image of God in each other, reflected back in the person looking back at us. Jesus' prayer is my prayer, not only for our nation, but indeed for our world. But alas, I have a feeling that it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of faith, a lot of prayer, praying with lips and life to bring us together as one. Those words of that psalm are upon my lips even now as I read stories of, in 21 states, black children, brown children receiving racist texts telling them they're going to be deported or off to a plantation to pick cotton. Then social media is rife with retribution promises and all that kind of vitriol. And I wonder at times, where is God in all of this? particularly in this time of vulnerability, for some of us at least. And then we have for us this morning a beautiful reminder of what and where God meets us and with whom God can act and do great things to transform the world. In a vulnerable, frail, cast out, marginalized individual, simple woman, unnamed as she is in the gospel, the poor widow. There in the gospel, we see this widow as she is in the temple. And for those of us who know our scripture and our history, the temple was a huge edifice. It was at the heart and root of the entire community where all activity swirled around. And it was a place that people believed that this is where God dwells. And so this marginalized woman, this poor widow who has been taken advantage of, goes to the temple to give her offering, not to the system, but to the glory of God. And there, out there in that scene, this holy scrum of sorts of activity, there is the rich folk holding up 50,000 denarii and so forth, and the scribes sitting there with their fine robes, taking it all in, looking forward to box seats at the Bengals game and the like. And Jesus sees this scene, and he knows that these scribes, he knows that the system, he knows that it is corrupt and broken. That a system that is designed to bring people together is actually creating an us versus them, us or them paradigm. The haves and the have-nots and the like. And he knows that at heart and root of that is the scribes who are charged with, again, bringing people together, charged with caring for God's people. And instead, they are maintaining the status quo. So Jesus, sitting outside of the treasury, watches this woman. And it's significant because Jesus, being opposite the treasury, he's not part of the system. He's outside of it, looking in, watching us get lost and trapped in ourselves and our greed and our egoism and the like. And he calls his disciples over, who themselves are looking at the grand structure, wondering, I guess they're perhaps saying, maybe I might get a statue of me up there one day, and so on. And he calls them over to watch this beautiful scene, the significant moment of this widow who takes 2 pennies, her last all that she had, which is worth nothing as far as the temple structure goes, but it means everything to her. And from this place of vulnerability and marginalization, she gives what she can, all that she can, a part of herself, all of herself, to God. And Jesus warns those disciples because he knows he's going to give them the authority and the power to carry on the work of caring for God's people. When the temple, which he would come down years later, he knew that they would be the embodiment of God's love, that they would be the place where God's love dwells. He tells them, do not be like those scribes who love fancy places of lauding and the like, who like to devour widows and take advantage and exploit and corrupt the creatures of God. Don't be like them. You see that woman, that poor widow? All those rich folks are giving out of abundance, but she is giving out of love and faith all that she has for God, for love, for faith. That message spoke to me as I feel vulnerable, as I am human too. And it reminded me, and it should remind all of us, no matter where we are, regardless of stripe, we all know vulnerability and fragility because we are mortal beings, subject to a world that is often feels beyond us, larger than us. How many of us daily watch the news and wish we could do something about what's happening in Gaza and feel helpless in the face of it? Or Ukraine, or even on our streets. And yet what we're reminded of through this widow, her might, is that even though we are vulnerable, and even though we may feel powerless, we can still give. And I'm not talking about money. That's for another stewardship sermon. But we can give part of ourselves. We can give all of ourselves. We can give love. That's the power we have. That is more powerful than a vote. You see, because hate subtracts, love multiplies. Love begets love begets love. And insignificant as it may seem, for God, that's the mustard seed. In the midst of that whole scene, Jesus sees that woman, that widow. And in the midst of our world, with all of the happenings around us, Jesus sees us and says to us, do not be like those who corrupt and destroy. Do not render evil for evil. Do not give in to hate. Do not lose hope. Believe in God. Believe also in me. And love. And give. Hard as it may be, as useless as you may feel, trust me, Jesus says, greater things you will do than I have done, because my Spirit lives within you. And so for me, as I wrestle and continue still with what is going on in our nation and uncertain is what the future holds, one thing I know, and one piece of prophecy, if you will, prophetic word that stayed with me like that psalm, was Jesus' words read at the outset of his ministry from the prophet Isaiah when he was at a church. And he looked at those around him and he stood up and said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because God has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery to the sight of the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And he dropped the mic. And he got busy doing that work, healing and reconciling and liberating, loving and serving, transforming, uniting, and awakening people to God's love and their belovedness in God. And as my eyes look to the hills, as our eyes perhaps will be looking to the hills, wondering what is next for us, what's the next chapter? Jesus says the next chapter is this. My Spirit, the Spirit of God, is upon you to do the work of love, to be the church, to care for the widowed and the orphaned, to reconcile, to heal, to liberate, and to serve my people, to make and bring us and work for and strive for oneness. That's the role of the church. And I'm not talking about the institution, the system. I'm talking about the people. We are the church. And that is our call and our charge, no matter who is in office. Because I'll tell you this, no matter who won this election, unrest is sure to follow either way. And I am clear to my task, as I pray that you are clear to yours, to love and to give. To the best that we can, to uphold the baptismal covenant, to strive for justice and peace among all people, and respect the dignity of every human being, to resist evil in all of its forms, those powers and principalities that corrupt and destroy the creatures of God. That's what we must do. That is who we are. Period. Exclamation point. And we have to trust, as that widow in the gospel trusted, that that is going to be enough. That our love will beget love. Our service will beget service, and so on. And so my prayer for the church is that we will keep and get busy doing the work, opening our doors and our hearts to God's people, no matter who they are and what they believe, that they may find a place at God's table and be fed and nourished and sustained. It's my open prayer that we won't give in to the corruption of the systems of this world, and that we, as the Episcopal Church, will avoid complacency and idleness in the face of injustice. I personally will not tolerate images of children in cages again. I will put my life on the line for it. I hope you will too. I will speak out if need be. I will love my neighbor as myself, as difficult as it may be, because my neighbor, regardless of stripe, is a child of God. My hope is that I can help them see that in themselves and that they can see that in me. And together we begin to close that widening gap and repair that breach. My hope for us as individuals, as followers of the Christ with whom God dwells, is that we will create safe space to engage with one another. The problem is that the chasm has been so deep is that we don't even trust one another. And yet if you drove through neighborhoods, you saw the Trump sign and the Harris sign, neighbors side by side. My hope is that they get together at the barbecue or over Christmas or whatever it is and find the common humanity and story. My hope and prayer is that we will listen to the marginalized and not dismiss them as the scribes did to that widow. They will recognize that for some people, this moment in history is an existential threat to their very livelihoods and being. And we can't dismiss that and say, oh, well, it's just another election, it'll be fine. We don't know that for them. Listen to them. Comfort them. Give to them. Advocate for them. Assure them that you're with them and that they're not alone. Jesus said, when 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there I shall be in the midst of them. And so again, I do not know what the days hold for us, but I know what they will be if we are not the church. If we don't herald that good news and live out our baptismal covenant. And I also know this, that God is in charge. And if God is in charge, all will be well, and all manner of things will be well. Amen.